Good afternoon. I'm Mindy Crawford, Executive Director of Preservation Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us today. Today marks 30 years of Pennsylvania at Risk. We have some exciting and sad updates to share with you today and the announcement of our 30th list. Thank you to our Zoom webinar sponsors, Margaret and Bob Wallace. While I wasn't working for Preservation Pennsylvania at the time of the first at-risk program, there's a story that I've often heard. Former Senator Jim Furlow, a passionate preservationist, was so distressed by the threatened demolition of the Syria Mosque in Pittsburgh that he chained himself to one of the large lions outside the building. You've often heard the story of, have you ever chained yourself to a bulldozer? And generally when I ask that question, no one raises their hand, but so it always gives me a little bit of a thrill to think of Jim Furlow being chained to a lion. The loss of this building is the catalyst for the first Preservation Pennsylvania at-risk list in 1992. Each year, we solicit nominations for inclusion in this list. Historic resources are not saved just because we list them. They are saved because many people and factors come together, usually at the local level, that change the situation. However, we know that putting it on a statewide list brings some focus to it and does make a difference in some of the sites and buildings and their outcome. In 2012, our 20th year of at-risk, we physically visited each site that was listed since 1992. And surprisingly, some of the sites that we had thought were lost not only turned out to still be standing, but many had been rehabilitated and were enjoying a new and vibrant life. Of course, we have lost too many of them, and some of the outcomes were less than we hoped. But in the end, the numbers support our belief that this list can make a difference. So I've updated the numbers for this year, our 30th year. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we didn't get out to see all of the sites again, but we have done a good effort of reaching out and checking on the status of a number of them. So what have we learned in 30 years? First and foremost, we've learned that development pressure is the biggest challenge. If someone wants to build something, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that's going to stand in its way. And this is something that's going to come up later today when we list our this year's list. Good economy can be a threat. A weak economy can be a threat. Lack of local tools that can help to have preservation be the preferred outcome are always a challenge. And of course, there are some sites that no longer have a use, and it's difficult to find something for them to be. And finally, site control. This is the biggest one of all. If you have a reluctant owner or you can't find anyone who's willing to negotiate, unfortunately, the outcome is usually not positive. So here are some updates. I'm starting with some of our earliest ones. This is a little bit of a late update because I did not keep track of this project because it was finished in 2018. This is a project that took a lot longer for an outcome than I think anyone would have thought. The outcome here is that the original National Register listed truss bridge that you see on the left was replaced with a new truss bridge. The original bridge was demolished because there couldn't be two river crossings at this site. The reason that this new truss bridge was built, it happened because of a very long Section 106 process that included, this is a bridge that goes from Pennsylvania to New York. So it included 2 state historic preservation offices, 2 state departments of transportation, 2 statewide preservation nonprofits, 2 community groups, 1 for replacement and 1 for keeping the bridge, 2 different districts of the Federal Highways Administration, groups that were interested in various things, including it is a wild and scenic river and it could only have a certain number of crossings. There was a kayaking group that was interested. The dark sky group was concerned about the amount of lighting that went on it. There were environmental groups. The National Trust for Historic Preservation got involved, as well as the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. So in the end, I think the Section 106 process worked. It didn't save the original bridge, which was never going to be rehabilitated to be able to handle the capacity that it needed, but a bridge very different than what was originally proposed was what was constructed. So I consider that to be a save, even though it's technically a loss. Conneaut Lake Park opened in 1892 and originally boasted a historic hotel, a tree-lined midway, an antique carousel, and other historic rides with names like Blue Streak and Tumblebug. The Dreamland Ballroom was described as the largest without pillars in the eastern United States and once hosted music legends like Jimmy Dorsey and Guy Lombardo. The Blue Streak roller coaster was a wooden roller coaster built in 1937. Maintaining it was always a challenge, but it was loved by all, but it did eventually close because of maintenance issues in 2009. A Keystone Historic Preservation grant helped it reopen in 2010. Maintenance concerns continued, but it actually operated all the way up until 2019. The park has been at risk because of it was seeking a new owner. There were a lot of challenges with some of the buildings there, and eventually a new owner did come forward, but unfortunately he obtained a demolition permit for the Blue Streak roller coaster. And in the midst of taking it down, it actually caught on fire, and so it was lost on January 4th, 2022. After many ideas were considered and many interested developers came forward for the reuse of this theater, which, just on a personal note, was where I saw my very first movie in 1964, Mary Poppins. The newly formed Hanover Economic Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit that was formed to assist with projects to benefit Hanover, secured private funds to purchase the property. The owner, who had maintained it so very well, and I know it's deteriorating, but he did make sure that it was always airtight and that the roof was good. We were able to negotiate with him to purchase the building, and it is now community owned. It is a joint project of the Hanover Economic Development Corporation, the Redevelopment Authority of York County, and the York County Economic Alliance. And so the Hanover Group will be seeking proposals for someone to reuse the building. And our funder has given us 2 years to find a new owner. So if anyone is interested in owning a theater or rehabilitating a theater, please get in touch with me. When I first saw this property and we considered putting it on the list, I was really concerned that this was not going to be a positive outcome. But the new owners of this property came forward shortly after it was included on our at-risk list in 2013. This is in Coudersport along Route 6. They are making great progress, and they are showing their progress on Facebook very, very very genuinely. They're telling you of all the challenges that they've had with materials and all of the work that they've done. So I encourage you to follow them on Facebook or on their webpage, and I can't wait to see the finished product. While the Lincoln Motor Court was originally included on our at-risk list for other factors, the future is still uncertain for this very lovely intact motor court, because the owners are ready to retire. They've done a great job of owning and operating this for many years along the Lincoln Highway, but now they're ready to find a buyer. And although it's been for sale for almost 2 years now, no one has come forward. So we need someone with a passion, someone who wants to run a very quaint little hotel on the Lincoln Highway. So won't you help us find someone who will continue this legacy? This is one we announced last year as a positive update, but now we can officially say that it's been saved. The Conservation Fund purchased the property, and eventually the barn will become the new visitor center for the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. The house will be interpreting the Underground Railroad story of the Mifflins, who were part of a very active Underground Railroad network between York and Lancaster County. And it will include a series of walking trails so people can understand the connection from this house to the river. This was a joint project between the Conservation Fund, the Heritage Area, and Preservation Pennsylvania, and we had a lot of ups and downs along the way, but in the end, this is definitely going to be a great success. Another one that I'm especially proud of is the Yorktown Hotel. In 2017, it was announced that the hotel was closing and that they were going to be rehabilitating it by taking off the top 6 stories of the building, just maintaining the first floor and that mezzanine area where the ballroom is. Of course, the community had very mixed feelings about this, and the local historic organizations in York reached out to us. And of course, because I worked in York for so many years, I was very familiar with the building. And I basically got on the phone and I called everyone. I called everyone who would talk to me. I called the owners, I called the developers, I called the community members, and everyone told me, you will not be successful. This is a done deal. The top of this building is going to come off. And while I'm not taking credit for it, eventually I got a phone call that said, could you come talk to us about historic tax credits? And so in the end, the decision was made to rehabilitate the building using historic tax credits and a combination of public and private funding. And it's going to open this fall. And the project manager who has been overseeing the work is going to be married there as the first event. So that seems like a very great way to celebrate. This is a very recent loss as well. The Monessen Savings and Trust in Monessen in Westmoreland County. It's been sort of a sad case for a while. As you can see in the picture on the right, the building had been deteriorating for many years. But despite receiving a grant to assist with the stabilization of this building, the city of Monessen voted to demolish it in April of this year. This ends a long-standing battle between the advocate trying to save it and the city. He ran for mayor and was elected, but as soon as his four-year term ended in January, and despite the grant for rehabilitation, the demolition moved forward. The Carlisle Indian School is a place of that happens to be located on the Carlisle barracks of the Army War College, which makes it a bit of a challenge to get access to. So when we listed the farmhouse in 2019, it was with the hope that it was deteriorating and it was vacant, and we were really afraid that it was going to be lost. And this was part of the school farm that played a very integral role in the education and experiences of the Indian students. The farmhouse not only housed the head farmer and his family, but also provided an agricultural classroom, sleeping quarters, and a dining hall for the student farm laborers. Was very deteriorated. And as you know, this is one of those sites where saving it is important because of the horrible story that this Carlisle Indian School tells of the many Native Americans who were brought to this place and essentially were supposed to become white. They had new names, they had their, they were wearing certain clothes. It was really sort of a military style situation, and many of them died there. So what is remaining of that site is this farmhouse and of course the cemetery. So the Friends of the Carlisle Indian School are hoping to eventually take over the farmhouse and to create a place of remembrance and a place of healing, so that when the descendants of the family, the descendants of the students who were either students here or who died here come back to visit, they will have a place that they can go to be. So a great progress on this is that the Carlisle Barracks has decided that they do indeed need to use this building. And because it is a National Historic Landmark and because it is owned by a federal entity, it did go through a Section 106 process. And because of that, its rehabilitation will meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. The building will be in use and cared for, but the eventual plan is for this farmhouse to be turned over to the Friends of the Carlisle Indian School, so that this can become the place of memory that they would like it to be. Last year, we listed 3 sites on the at-risk list, and I'm happy to report that we have not lost any of them. In fact, we've had quite a bit of progress. So our first one, St. Agnes Church, a small group of interested individuals, including Preservation Pennsylvania and Partners for Sacred Places, requested a meeting with Carlisle University that didn't really go anywhere. And when a new president was appointed, we tried again. We provided a lot of background and information and expressed our hope that they would reconsider the demolition of this beautiful place. In early April, we learned that the demolition was off the table and that Carlisle had reversed its position on demolition and will be issuing an RFP for reuse of the church. We really believe that the efforts of the team and the public pressure made a difference, and we stand ready to assist them if needed. The Friends of Fort Halifax Park have been busy caring for the buildings on site and offering educational programs. They are working with Halifax Township to create a strategic plan for the site. Recently, the township received a gaming grant from Dauphin County to fund improvements to the rail crossing and provide a turnaround for emergency vehicles. This would be the first step in getting a gated crossing. There is an active rail line that runs through the park. Those gaming funds will also be used to pay for an engineering and architectural assessment of the buildings so that a reuse plan can be developed. Last summer, a 2-week archaeological field school from Juniata College successfully found the corner of the fort on the last day of field work, in addition to many artifacts dating back to the time of the fort. The next archaeological field school will be in 2023. So to go from a threat of demolition to this kind of positive activity is really encouraging. And finally, our third one, in 2021, an ad hoc committee was formed, and in February 2022, the Board of Supervisors of Lower Makefield Township, who are the owners, passed a motion to fund a Patterson Farm master plan. $300,000 has been allocated, and the plan will serve as the blueprint for rehabilitation and reuse of all the properties at Patterson Farm. They are currently finalizing costs for environmental remediation, lead-based paint in particular, throughout the site, particularly in the grounds surrounding the Satterthwaite property. The Friends of the Patterson Farm have also been active and are dedicating to seeing the farm used. They hope to obtain a lease to use Satterthwaite Farmstead to create a community-supported agriculture, CSA, offering produce grown here, and eventually establishing an agricultural heritage center. Now, I know we only listed 3, and so 3 successes seems, maybe not as impressive if we had listed 12, but I'm pretty happy that in the crazy times we've been through that we were able to get 3 positive activity reports on last year's list. So let's move on to this year. We solicit nominations for inclusion in the at-risk, and there are some criteria that we provide to both ourselves and to our review panel and to the people who are applying. Will the listing on Pennsylvania at-risk really be able to make a difference in the whatever is happening at the time? Are the proposed actions reasonable? Are there additional ideas for what could be done? How's the place valued? What does it mean to you, to your community, to history, to architecture? Is the place really at risk? Sometimes properties aren't at risk. They might need to fundraise, they might need to find a new owner, but they aren't actually at risk. Or is it too late? Was the demolition permit already issued? So taking all of those factors into consideration, the committee reviewed them. We received 9 nominations from 9 counties. And we had a review committee of statewide partners and other professionals who work in the field. And we selected 4 for inclusion. Now, one of the things that's a little different this year is, yes, we are listing 4, but we've identified issues that need further focus and attention. The first focus area is the reuse of former church buildings. Church closures are not a new issue. Aging and dwindling congregations are, large buildings with beautiful features that must be maintained has led to some very tough choices for church leaders. Many churches have been abandoned and left to deteriorate. Some have been demolished. Some have found new congregations or new uses, but the challenge remains. How do we find new stewards for these historic places? So we've listed the Immaculate Conception Church in Pittsburgh, constructed 1959 to 1961. The Immaculate Conception Church in Pittsburgh is a beautiful space filled with stained glass, mosaic tiles, sculpture, and furnishing. Its very tight urban setting makes it an unexpected surprise tucked in the Bloomfield neighborhood. Recently, the Archdiocese of Pittsburgh made the decision to close this church. A neighborhood group has petitioned the Vatican to reverse this decision. Should this closure stand, the challenges of finding an appropriate new use is complicated by several factors. A new roof is needed now to prevent further deterioration of the plaster and ceramic tiles. The East End of Pittsburgh has seen significant development recently. And while these situations are, concerning, the more difficult situation is if this would go to a new use that was not within the Catholic Church realm. The Pittsburgh Diocese requires the removal of all religious artifacts, including the stained glass that is so iconic. We first dealt with this issue with St. Agnes that we listed last year. And so if you imagine this building having a new use, it would have that new use without any stained glass or mosaic that have any kind of religious symbols on them. So it would definitely change what the church looks like and its integrity. The second focus area is also not new. The rapid permanent loss of agricultural land due to development pressure, especially warehouses. Many times I have heard that Pennsylvania is one of the most beautiful states. Our agriculture land and farmsteads are a large part of that charm. Losing farmland to development is not a new issue, nor is it one that we, or all of us who care, have been able to tackle. 3 of the sites nominated this year are because of large-scale warehouse development, in addition to traditional development pressure. Chains like Dollar General often build new, larger stores and leave the old buildings vacant and deteriorating. Walmart has been doing this for years. Now, as the large-scale warehouse development seems out of control, the same thing is happening. Newer, larger warehouses are needed to accommodate our increasing demand for online shopping, and the size of warehouses is getting bigger and often leaving older warehouses vacant. If historic preservation includes the reuse of buildings so we don't lose them, why could it not also encourage the reuse of these abandoned newer buildings instead of taking even more farmland for bigger warehouses? We just announced the successful save of the Mifflin house that was proposed for demolition for warehouses. The smaller warehouses that were built on another part of the site about 10 to 20 years ago are no longer the size warehouses that companies want. So in this case, what was going to be 4 warehouses would have been 2 larger warehouses. This would have required the demolition of the Mifflin house that was previously proposed as remaining in place. We need to do a better job of letting our municipal officials know that they have the ability to control where development happens. And I think it is time for us all to come together and have this discussion. We need to stop letting business build wherever they want and then abandon that building a few years later, moving on to take another piece of our pristine farmland. The first site is the Peebles Homestead. Built 1775, the Peebles Homestead sits in the middle of 156 acres of pristine farmland, which is zoned commercial. The homestead is flanked by a housing development and 48 acres of farmland to the north, a warehouse to the west, a 61-acre farm to the east, and Interstate 81 to the south. The home is currently vacant, and the land is cultivated by a local dairy farmer who also uses the barn and outbuildings. One warehouse has been constructed on a neighboring property, and there were plans to construct a casino on the homestead. The casino will be located at an existing building nearby, but there are plans to develop another parcel into a convenience store and trucking terminal. Recently, numerous historic homes along Interstate 81 corridor have been demolished for warehouse construction. Without intervention, the Peebles homestead and home will suffer the same fate. The Hanby farm. Built 1824, this 13-acre property is the last arm and the largest open space remaining in Upper Chichester. The township has a long agricultural history dating from the arrival of the first purchasers to the Pennsylvania colony in 1681. The property has operated in an agricultural capacity for at least 200 years. Adjacent to Route 322, Chichester Avenue, and Larkin's Corner Shopping Center, the farm has high visibility and is a local landmark. There is an active proposal to demolish all of the buildings on the site for a 100,000 square foot warehouse construction. The goat herder who has been using the site has had his lease canceled and was asked to vacate. In the short term, denial by the township of the owner's application to demolish all of the buildings would alleviate the immediate threat of a warehouse development. But we would need a longer-term strategy, finding an appropriate adaptive reuse or a new owner who would consider preserving the buildings and establish a conservancy for the long-term preservation of this last piece of farmland. You can see and hear how close it is to civilization. The next site is the former Westinghouse Research and Development Center that is sited on 150 acres in Churchill Borough. It's 10 miles from Pittsburgh's Point. It holds a noteworthy place in architecture, design, industry, and science, and is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places, maintaining significant integrity. The multiplex modernist corporate campus and landscape was designed in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, and is exemplary of mid-century suburban R&D facilities with park-like surrounds. At the time of submission, the site was proposed for large-scale demolition and the construction of a new Amazon warehouse, 634,800 square foot building footprint, with 49 loading docks, 325 trailer parking stalls, 1,584 surface parking stalls, and 200 structure car parking stalls. This is a massive change to a site that is so beautiful and open. This proposal triggered a Section 106 review because the United States Army Corps of Engineers needed to issue a permit. Just a reminder that a federally funded, licensed, or permitted project is what would trigger Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. In the meantime, Amazon pulled their proposal and the Section 106 process is being closed. But this does not by any means eliminate the threat. It is a large parcel of land that is still vacant and subject to development that would destroy the site. Thinking about the scale of the previous proposal, this site is very much at risk. Our final focus area is valuing mid-century modern architecture. When the show Mad Men started in 2007, there was a new appreciation for the 1960s design and style. Mid-century modern architecture was turning 50, making it eligible for the National Register. Those of us who love this style were encouraged. Some great buildings have been recognized and preserved. But for those of us working at the local and regional level, it's still an uphill climb. Many local review commissions are not comfortable assessing these buildings. Architectural style guides often don't include them. And building inventories haven't been recently updated, and so they don't include them as well. Also, there is always the contingent of folks who just don't like them yet, I say. It's okay. When I started in preservation in 1982, I thought Art Deco was hideous and couldn't imagine why anyone would like it. When 3 of our nominated sites, including the 2 we have listed, were mid-century modern, and many of our technical assistance calls about these buildings were, many of our technical assistance calls were about buildings like this, we decided that we needed to spend some time and attention to this era of architecture. So 2 of our sites that we've already gone over, the Westinghouse Research and Development Center and the Immaculate Conception Church, are going to have sort of double duty here to talk about this project. By noting these 2 sites under this focus area, we hope to use this as a catalyst to help educated elected officials, commissions, history groups, and individuals about this era of buildings and build an appreciation of them. Do we want to save them all? Of course not. but we are losing some very good ones. And by helping others understand how to evaluate and recognize those that are significant and important, we hope for more saves. So what's next? For the sites we listed, we will meet with partners at each site and identify issues and priorities. And then we do waive field service fees for at-risk properties for the first year and provide additional services and support, attendance at meetings, providing letters of support for grant funding, or finding experts who can do work pro bono. Once a property is on our at-risk list, it remains on it forever, no matter the outcome, although a save is always the goal. And we do regularly go through the list and try to find updates for everything. Our wider scope for 2022 is this. In some past years, we did focus on specific topics like metal truss bridges and historic schools. So in 2022, we're going to focus on the 3 issues that I just covered. This is going to guide our work for the next 12 months. Whoops, excuse me. Working with experts in these focus areas, we're going to offer a series of webinars, blog posts, and in-depth technical assistance. This material, as well as updates on the at-risk properties, will be included in a printed and digital booklet and newsletter. I want to thank our review panel. We invite a different set of partners and volunteers each year to go through all of these applications that we receive and then come together to discuss which ones are being included. So this year we included an architect, an archaeologist, a representative of Heritage PA, an expert in land conservation and agriculture, an expert in mid-century modern architecture, a representative from the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, and a representative from the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office. So we really thank them for their time. And just a note, applications are due Monday, June 27th for our Pennsylvania Historic Preservation Awards. And we love to honor projects that are at risk to award. Many former at-risk properties have received awards, and this is the best outcome and proof of the importance of this work. Thank you for those of you who have made donations when you registered. Funds raised support our work with these at-risk properties. If you didn't have the opportunity to make a donation, this link will take you to a site that you can donate online. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your interest and support of our work.